My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm not writing this story to impress anyone. I'm writing it because some memories don't fade with time. They stay buried inside you, quietly shaping who you become. And maybe someone out there will read this and realize they're not alone. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, in a neighborhood where houses were old and dreams were careful. Our home was small, worn down by years of struggle. My mother worked as a cleaner in a nursing home. She left before sunrise and came back late at night, exhausted but never complaining. My father died when I was young, so responsibility arrived early in my life. Money was always tight, but my mother never let me feel worthless. I loved studying, not because I was extraordinary, but because books were the only place where no one judged, my clothes only my mind. When I got accepted into Ohio State Community College, I thought my life was finally changing. My mother held the acceptance letter for a long time before quietly saying, "Sarah, this is your chance. Don't waste it." On my first day, I wore my cleanest clothes. They weren't fashionable, but I hoped no one would notice. My shoes were old, though I had cleaned them carefully. I looked at myself in the mirror and told myself everything would be fine. The moment I stepped onto campus, I realized how wrong I was. Students walked around confidently, dressed in expensive clothes, laughing loudly, acting like the place belonged to them. I held my bag tighter and headed toward my class. I sat in the back of the classroom. Students talked about internships, connections, and future plans. I stayed quiet. I didn't belong to that world, or at least, that's how it felt. The cafeteria was the hardest place for me. That's where I first noticed Logan Reed. He was always surrounded by people, speaking loudly, wearing confidence like it was natural. Madison Clark was usually beside him, smiling in a way that never felt kind. And then there was Ethan Brooks, who laughed the loudest whenever someone became the target. One afternoon, I was carrying my food tray when I accidentally bumped into Logan. "Watch it," he said sharply. "I'm sorry," I replied and tried to walk away. Behind me, Madison said, "Maybe she doesn't belong here." Ethan laughed. "Yeah, wrong college." I heard every word, but I didn't turn around. That day, I learned that silence can hurt, but sometimes it's the only way to survive. In class, whenever I answered a question, people looked surprised, as if they didn't expect someone like me to speak intelligently. Once, when a professor praised my answer, someone whispered, "Didn't expect that." A few students laughed. I looked down at my notebook. I knew if I spoke, my voice would shake. My life turned into a routine. College in the morning. A part-time job at a grocery store in Toledo in the evening. And nights at the Public Library of Toledo. I worked as a cashier. People paid, took their bags, and left. Sometimes my classmates came in. They recognized me but avoided eye contact, as if I didn't exist. The library was the only place where I felt safe. Laughter, judgment, just silence and books. One night, I wrote a sentence in my diary. "I will change this." One evening, completely exhausted, I told my mother, "Maybe I don't belong there." She stayed quiet for a moment and then said, "Sarah, the world will keep reminding you where you came from. But you must never forget where you're going." I cried that night. But the next morning, I went back to college. During my final year, Logan said in front of everyone, "Be realistic, Sarah. People like us lead. People like you just get by. The room filled with laughter. I looked at him and said calmly, "Getting by is still moving forward." Laughed? I stayed silent. But something inside me had changed. After my final year in college, I thought things would finally get easier. I told myself that after all I had endured, life might finally soften. But I was wrong. I started applying for jobs. One application, then another, then another. I polished my resume, rewrote my cover letters, added every bit of experience I had, but the responses were almost always the same. "We regret to inform you." At first, I kept my hope alive. I told myself it just took time. But as weeks turned into months, my heart grew heavy. Every evening, my mother would ask, "Any word today?" I'd smile and say, "Not yet, but it'll come." My smile wasn't fake, but my confidence felt fragile. I refused to give up. I took the Ohio State entrance exams for advanced programs, but I failed the first one. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I sat on a bus stop, the result in my hands. Tears just sliding down without warning. That same day, my phone buzzed. It was Madison Clark. Still studying, with a laughing emoji. I shut the phone off. That evening, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't pity myself anymore. I got back to studying harder than before. This time, I focused on public administration and law, preparing for the career I wanted. I didn't have tutors or private coaches, just the library, online lectures, and my own handwritten notes late into the night. By day, I worked sometimes at the grocery store, sometimes cleaning offices. Some nights, it felt like I was only alive to work. But every night before sleep, I whispered to myself, "This will pass." I passed the second exam. That day, I felt something I hadn't before, genuine confidence. For the first time, I knew my effort wasn't wasted. Next came scholarships. I applied to 5 programs. 4 rejected me. The 5th sent an email that I read 3 times just to make sure. I wasn't imagining it. Scholarship approved. When my mother saw it, tears filled her eyes. "You've proven that hard work never fails," she said. College days were brutal. Classes, assignments, exams all at once. Many classmates had resources. I didn't. I had only preparation and determination. Once, someone asked, "Why do you work so hard?" I didn't answer, because I knew my hard work was my answer. Over time, I changed. My voice grew stronger. I started asking questions. I joined debates. And for the first time, people started listening. One day, after class, a professor stopped me. "Sarah, you have potential. Don't waste it." Simple words, but worth more than anything to me. This was the stage where I realized success isn't just about talent, it's about endurance. Every rejection, every failure didn't break me, they prepared me. I knew the journey wasn't over. The real test was still ahead. But by now, I was no longer the girl who went unnoticed in class. I had begun to recognize my own strength. Time kept moving quietly, but this time, I wasn't the woman who lost to it. My education was complete. My experience was solid. And now, I wasn't just waiting for opportunities, I was ready for them. I started applying to state departments. These were places where only merit and records mattered. No scats, favors, just law, numbers, and performance. I submitted every application with confidence. Because this time I didn't just have hope, I had proof. A few months later, I received a call from an important Department of the State of Ohio. The interview was tough. The questions were direct. The environment was formal and cold. I answered every question with preparation and clarity. When I walked out, I didn't know what the result would be, but one thing was certain. I had given everything I had. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. It was an appointment letter from the regional commissioner's office. He sat there for a long time, unable to move. When my mother entered the room, I couldn't speak. I simply placed the letter in front of her. She read it, looked at me, and then pulled me into a tight hug. In that moment, it felt like years of exhaustion melted away all at once. With the new position came serious responsibilities. Decisions had to be made. Files reviewed. Everything to follow the labs. I never wanted people to recognize me by my past. I wanted my work to speak for me. One day, several files landed on my desk. New recruitment applications. I began reviewing them one by one. Then my eyes froze on a name. Logan Reed. My heart skipped for a second, but I composed myself. I opened the file. The numbers were low. The record incomplete. I picked up the next file. Madison Clark. And then the third. Ethan Brooks. The same names. The same people. The room was silent. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, then neatly arranged the files and placed them aside. A few days later, they walked into my office. Logan spoke first. "We've applied for this position. We're hoping to be given a chance." I looked at them. None of them could meet my eyes. In a calm voice, I asked, "You know how hiring works here, right?" Logan nodded. "Based on merit." I opened the file and said, "Your numbers don't meet the required standard." Silence filled the room. Madison spoke softly. "Is there any exception?" I shook my head. "No, not here. Not in any government institution. The law is the same for everyone." Ethan opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. I finished. "This isn't a personal decision. This is the same system that brought me here. The only difference is I prepared myself according to it." They stood up quietly and left. When the door closed, I leaned back in my chair. I didn't feel the noise of victory inside me, just a strange, deep calm. I didn't need revenge, because the truth had spoken for itself. That day, I understood something clearly. Success isn't about humiliating someone else. Real success is reaching a place where decisions are made by principles. Emotions. That evening, I had dinner with my mother. She smiled and asked, "How was your day?" I replied, "Just normal." She smiled back. She already understood everything. This story doesn't end here, but this chapter does. I am Sarah Mitchell, the same girl who once sat alone in a cafeteria. The only difference now is my voice is heard. And if someone asks what my revenge was, my answer is simple. I proved myself.